Here's The Naughtiest Girl by Enid Blyton. It was the summer term at Whiteleaf School, and all the children were excited to be back again. Elizabeth, Julian, Harry, John, Martin, Rosemary and the rest. Whiteleaf was a fine boarding school in the country, where boys and girls were taught together. There were two headmistresses, Miss Bell and Miss Best, nicknamed the Beauty and the Beast by Elizabeth, who had been the naughtiest girl in the school during her first term there. As they rushed round the school excitedly, Elizabeth saw Julian Holland, happily singing a little song, glad to be back.
Hi, Julian. Summer term.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Come and look at my new tennis racket.
Looks a good one. It is. So what's she going to be this term? Naughtiest girl in the school? Best girl? Silliest?
I'm a monitor, as you jolly well know. I'm going to do my best and be a monitor all the term, not chucked out in the middle, as I was last term. This term, I shall be a jolly sight more careful and sure of my facts before I report anyone to the meeting. Anyway, what about you?
Oh, I'm going to do my best too, but I've got all sorts of bests. I'll beat you at work this term for one thing, and I'll beat you at tennis, and I'll beat you at thinking out a few little tricks to make life cheerful, and...
Oh, Julian, I hope you'll think of a few tricks, but please don't put sneezing powder in the pages of my French books again. Honestly, it's awful to have to keep on and on sneezing without stopping. Hey, look, Julian, there's somebody who looks just like you. Same black untidy hair and green eyes. He must be a new boy.
Oh, that's a cousin of mine. He's got rather a big opinion of himself, as you'll soon find out. He didn't want to come to Whiteleaf School at all.
Why ever not? I can't imagine anyone not wanting to come to Whiteleaf. I think it is the best school there is.
Well, he's not very fond of me. He doesn't like people who can do things better than he can, and he'll be in our form.
And when you use your brains, you'll be top whenever you want to. Even top of me.
Oh, that's easy to be top of you. But quite seriously, Elizabeth, go slow with Patrick. He can be very spiteful. Don't play the heavy monitor with him too soon or too much.
I shall tick him off if he doesn't toe the line. How will he behave, do you think?
A bit like you behaved when you first came. Don't you remember? I was told last term when I came here that you were the naughtiest girl in the school, and you meant to be too. The things you did.
You needn't keep reminding me of the first term. I was awful. I just can't think how I could have behaved like that.
Well, I wasn't here then, but I've heard plenty about it. I bet you'll always be known as the naughtiest girl, even if you go on being a monitor for the rest of your school days and end up as head girl.
Gosh, I'd never be that. Whoever heard of a naughtiest girl ending up as head girl? Here comes your cousin, Julian.
Hello, Patrick. Finding your way about a bit? This is Elizabeth Allen. She's a friend of mine, and if you want any help in anything, go to her, because she's a monitor.
I'm not likely to go to any friend of yours for help. And by the way, you needn't spread around the news that I'm your cousin.
Oh? Why not?
I'm not really proud of having you for a cousin. Too swollen-headed for my taste. I'm going off to find some normal people. Bye.
If he wasn't new, I'd shake him till his teeth rattled.
What cheek from a new boy? Well, he won't cheek me. If he does, I'll report him.
Ah, good. There's the dinner bell. Come on.
Everyone hurried into the meal. Elizabeth scrambled for her place at the table and beamed round at everyone. How good it was to be back among all her friends. John Terry grinned at her across the table. John was partly responsible for the gardens of the school. He loved gardening and was very good at it. And Elizabeth, who loved gardening too, had always helped him a great deal.
Hello, Elizabeth. Did you have a good holiday?
Yes, thanks, John. It was marvellous.
Have you seen all the seeds that have come up since last term?
It won't be long before they start flowering.
I think we're going to have a fine show in the garden this summer.
Thanks to you.
Now, don't be modest. A lot of the ideas were yours.
Well, you made them work.
We'll have to go down to the garden soon. There's an awful lot of work to do. Fortunately, there are quite a lot of new children who seem pretty keen on the garden this term.
I'm glad about that, because although I do so want to help you in the gardens, I'm going to have a really busy time this term. I want to ride every day with Robert on the school ponies, practice my tennis and try to get into one of the school teams, and be a good monitor too.
And beat Julian as top of the form as well.
Oh yes, I do want to do that too.
And somebody else wanted to beat Julian too. That was Patrick, his cousin. Patrick was jealous of Julian. He had always been glad when he used to hear that his cousin didn't work hard at school and had continually been bottom. He knew that Julian had good brains, and it pleased him that he hadn't used them. All the same, he hadn't wanted to go to Whiteleaf School. Mixed boys and girls, he thought scornfully. I'd rather go to an all-boys school. Look at that Elizabeth now. Fancy my having to take orders from a girl. Well, I shan't pay much attention to her anyway. From the first day, Patrick set himself to make a good impression on the others in the form. He entered into everything. And because he was good at games, and could be very comical when he tried, he was soon well liked. He hadn't Julian's gift of making extraordinary noises, but how he wished he had. Julian could cluck like a hen laying an egg. He could buzz like a bluebottle fly, drone like a bumblebee, and make other strange noises like nothing at all. Patrick had often tried to imitate the noises, but he couldn't. For one thing, everyone knew he was making them, and that gave the game away. When Julian made the noises, nobody knew it was him. Patrick remembered with envy the last Christmas when Julian had come to his house for a party and had imitated a dog whining. Everybody had hunted round the house for ages, and though Patrick had looked at Julian very closely, he couldn't see a single movement of his mouth or throat. Patrick soon found that Whiteleaf wasn't at all the sissy kind of school he had expected. His class worked hard and played hard. Practically every boy and girl had a hobby, and if anything went wrong, it was reported at the big school meeting held each week. The school meeting was a kind of parliament at which everything was discussed frankly by the children themselves. Complaints were heard, grumbles were made and set right, money was distributed evenly, plans were made. Rita and William, the head girl and the head boy, presided. Miss Bell and Miss Best, the headmistresses, and Mr. Johns, the senior master, sat at the back of the hall, but did not interfere unless they were asked. 12 monitors sat on a platform with them, a kind of jury, Elizabeth always thought. She was very proud to be on the platform. If punishments had to be meted out, Rita and William said what they had to be. Patrick was sitting with John and Harry at the first meeting he attended.
Quiet now, everyone. Quiet. For the newcomers, I'll just explain what we do about money. A monitor will go around the meeting with a big box into which everybody must put all their money.
But how do we buy sweets and stamps and things?
Don't interrupt, Patrick. William is just explaining everything.
Thank you, Rita. When I say all their money, that includes the money we may get as birthday presents during the term. We will then give out £2 each to everyone, which is their pocket money for the week.
Elizabeth, will you now take the box round, please?
Come on, Patrick. Money, please.
Oh, I don't think much of this idea.
Just put it in, Patrick. Don't make a fuss.
You'll see why it's fair in a minute.
Right. Thank you, Elizabeth. Put the box on the table.
Now, Each week we ask if anybody needs any extra money for a particular purpose, and we decide whether it is justified. So, any requests?
Yes, William. One of the garden spades has broken. It was a very old one, and the wooden handle has rotted through.
How much will it cost, John?
Well, I've checked in the catalogue, and a good one will cost £5.
That seems reasonable. Agreed, Rita?
Yes, certainly. The garden gives so much pleasure to everyone.
It does indeed. Money granted.
Thank you, William and Rita.
This is the time when we listen to any complaints. Everyone has a right to make a complaint. But the newcomers should note 2 things. First, it is usually best to speak to your monitor to see if they can help you with the problem.
I can't see myself telling Elizabeth anything, Harry.
Shut up, Patrick.
Your monitor will usually be able to tell you if a complaint is the right course of action. The second thing is, make sure it's a proper complaint and not just telling tales.
Right. Has anyone a complaint this evening? No? Good.
The last thing we do now is to see if anyone has any grumbles.
Stand up, anyone with a grumble. No one? Well, we have had a happy meeting.
That's fine. I declare the meeting closed.
When Patrick first arrived at the school, he had been pleased to hear that he was to be in Julian's form. He had frequently heard his father and mother say what a pity it was that a boy with good brains like Julian should so often be bottom. He didn't know that the term before, Julian had had an awful shock when his mother nearly died. Julian had realised that he had been given a second chance to make his mother proud of him, and he had made a solemn promise in a little country church that from now on he would use his brains properly. Julian could be top of the form if he wanted to be. It was a shock to Patrick that in the first week's marks, Julian was top, Elizabeth was second, and he was tied third with somebody else.
Julian, I thought you always made a point of being bottom of the form, that you were so don't care-ish, or so I always heard.
You heard right. I just didn't happen to want to be top, that was all. But I do now. Did you want to be top, Patrick? Bad luck that I happen to be using my brains this term, isn't it?
Not really. I can see I'll have to do a little bit more work myself. That's all. You shouldn't be that hard to beat.
Oh, you think so, do you? Well, you know the old saying, if at first you don't succeed, try again.
Patrick turned away. All right, he'd work harder still. He wasn't going to play second fiddle to Julian. He thought about his tennis. He was good at that, and he would take special coaching and practice hard. Julian wasn't much good at tennis. It would do him good to be taken down a peg. Then, one day, Patrick came up against Elizabeth. She was the only person in the form he didn't try to be nice to. She was Julian's friend and a monitor. That was enough for Patrick. He hardly ever addressed a word to her, and if she ever came up to a group he was with, he walked away. Elizabeth laughed at first, but soon it infuriated her. She longed to pull him up for something, but the chance didn't come for 3 weeks. When an announcement was put on the notice board, it read, "Meeting of the Garden Committee at 5 o'clock sharp. All the first form must attend as well. Volunteers are wanted to help with the weeding." Patrick was in the first form. He saw the notice and ignored it. Why should he go? He wasn't interested in gardening, he hated weeding, and he certainly wasn't going to volunteer to do anything in the gardens. He went off to have a quiet practice by himself, taking his racket and tennis balls with him. There was a wall at the side of the school, against which he could hit the balls and strike them continually on the rebound. So, when the meeting gathered, Patrick was not there. John, who was in charge, looked round.
Are we all here?
No, John, Patrick isn't.
Have you any idea where he might be?
I bet I know where he is. Practising his tennis, hitting balls against the sidewall. I saw him go past the window with his racket.
Oh, is he indeed? Well, he's got to come. You're a monitor, Elizabeth. Fetch him, please, will you?
Right, I will. I'll bring him along at once. Shan't be a moment. Patrick! Patrick!
Did you call me?
Yes, I did.
I thought I heard you. What do you want?
You're supposed to be at the garden meeting. We're waiting to start. You'd better come at once.
Get out of my way, please. I'm practising.
John sent me to fetch you.
All right, I send you back.
Hey! Watch out! That ball nearly hit me.
I told you to get out of the way.
Don't be an idiot. You know I'm a monitor, don't you? Well, you have got to come when you're told. It's no good having monitors unless they're obeyed. You know that.
I'm not obeying a girl. Do go away. I shall get annoyed with you in a minute.
I will go away, and I'll take your racket with me. There!
Hey, you wretch! Give me back my racket!
Elizabeth had wrenched Patrick's racket out of his hand, and she raced away at top speed with it. Patrick tore after her in a rage. Elizabeth turned a corner. Patrick couldn't see her, and she deftly threw the racket into the middle of a bush. Then on she went without stopping, back to the meeting. She arrived there panting. Before she could say a word to the meeting, Patrick arrived too, fuming.
Where's my racket? How dare you snatch it like that, Elizabeth? What have you done with my racket?
Sit down, Patrick. We've been waiting for you.
Haven't come to your silly meeting. I've come after Elizabeth for my racket. She's taken it.
Sit down, Patrick. You're at the meeting now, and here you'll stay. You won't get your racket back till the meeting is over, and not then if you don't behave yourself.
Patrick was so surprised at John's determined voice that he sat down. He looked all round for his racket, making up his mind to snatch it and go. But he couldn't see it, which was not surprising, as it was still outside in the bushes. Patrick didn't hear a word at the meeting. He just glared at Elizabeth's triumphant face and scowled at the little smile on John's face. Meanwhile, Julian, amused at Elizabeth's method of bringing his unwilling cousin to the meeting, wondered where she had put the racket. But Elizabeth soon forgot about Patrick in her interest in the meeting. She was very fond of gardening, and John regarded her as one of his right-hand helpers. He kept consulting her, and she was pleased. She didn't notice that the sky had clouded over and that it had begun to rain. It was only when it suddenly pelted loudly against the window that she looked out and saw the torrents of rain falling. Even then she didn't think of the racket outside in the bushes. In fact, she didn't think of it till the meeting was over. Then John turned to the bored and sulky Patrick.
Now, Patrick, you can have your racket back from Elizabeth. And please remember that if a meeting of the whole form is arranged, you've got to come to it.
Yes, yes. Right, Elizabeth. Give me my racket.
It's not in here.
Well, where is it?
Wait here and I'll go and get it.
I'm coming with you.
There's no need.
I don't trust you. I'm coming.
Oh, all right. Ah, here it is.
You beast! You flung my racket into the bushes in the pouring rain. It'll be ruined.
It wasn't raining when I put it there. You know it wasn't.
Well, why didn't you go and get it when the rain began? You left it there on purpose. You meant the rain to spoil it, just like a girl.
I didn't mean to spoil it. I didn't even notice it was raining till nearly the end of the meeting. And then I forgot all about your racket. It's your fault for not coming to the meeting.
I hate you for this. Now you'll go and laugh about it with Julian and be glad that you've ruined my racket. There wasn't a better one in the school. You'll both be glad it was spoilt.
Patrick, don't be silly. Look, I'm very sorry I didn't think of your racket being out in the rain. If I'd remembered it, I'd have gone to get it at once. And of course we won't be glad if it's spoilt.
Yes, you will. I detest you both. I'll get even with you. You're just exactly the kind of mean, catty girl I'd expect my cocky cousin to be friends with.
Patrick tucked his racket under his arm and walked off in a rage, the rain still pouring down as he went. Elizabeth shook back her wet curls. Blow! What an idiot she had been to forget the racket when it began to rain. She was really sorry about that. Julian met her as she went back to the meeting room.
Gosh, you are wet. What happened? Where did you put his racket? Not out in the rain, I hope.
Yes, I did. But I didn't mean to. I grabbed Patrick's racket from him when he wouldn't stop practicing. He chased me, and as I got round a corner, I threw it into some bushes. He didn't see me.
Why didn't you go and get it when it started raining?
Well, I didn't realise it had started raining until too late. Oh, Patrick never liked me before, Julian, and now he's really furious with me.
That doesn't surprise me.
He hates you too, doesn't he? Oh dear, I do hope he won't do anything silly. He really looked as if he'd like to hit me with his racket.
He probably would have if he hadn't thought his racket would be hurt more than you would. Cheer up. What could he do to pay you out? Or me either. Nothing that matters. Come on into the gym. There'll be games going on there.
Patrick made a great fuss about his precious racket. He told everyone what had happened. He spoke of having to get all the strings replaced, and when the next school meeting was held, he decided he would get up and ask for money to have his racket completely restrung. The school meeting started in the usual way. Rita and William sat at the top table with the 12 monitors seated at a table below them. First of all, a monitor was sent round so that boys and girls who had just had birthdays could put any money they had received into the big box. Sometimes new children didn't like to have to do this, but they soon learnt how fair it was for everyone to share with the others. Next, the weekly £2 was given to every child.
Now, are there any requests for extra money?
I would just like to report that I bought the new spade, William. There was a sale on, and I managed to get it for £3. I put the £2 change in the box when it came round.
Excellent, John, and thank you. Now, are there any more requests for money? Because, if not, we'll deal with any complaints.
Yes, William. I have a request for money and a complaint.
Oh, have you? Very well, Patrick. Tell us about them.
My complaint is against a monitor, Elizabeth Allen, and my request for money is to do with her too.
And what did Elizabeth do to justify this complaint?
She left my tennis racket out in the rain and it's ruined. I want to ask for money out of the school money box so that I can pay for it to be restrung.
Elizabeth, perhaps you'd like to say something about this.
Patrick was practicing his tennis, hitting a ball against a wall, when he should have been attending a gardening meeting. John asked me to go and get him. Patrick refused to come.
Why did you refuse to go to the meeting, Patrick?
There was no point in me going to a gardening meeting. I'm not interested in gardening.
Interested or not, it's your duty to go to any meetings when they're called. Go on, Elizabeth.
Well, I grabbed Patrick's racket. As I was running back to the meeting room, I threw the racket into a bush so that Patrick wouldn't find it. While the meeting was on, it started to rain, but I didn't notice it. When the meeting was over and I went to get the racket, it was wet. I'm sorry it got wet, but it wasn't wet for very long. I'm sure, William, it doesn't need restringing.
Have you the racket with you, Patrick?
Yes.
Well, let me see it. I know a good bit about rackets and I can tell you at once what needs doing.
Oh, very well. Here you are.
If Patrick had come to the meeting as he should have done, this wouldn't have happened, William.
I agree, John. Now let's have a look at the racket.
Look, there's a string on already.
Let me see. Patrick, this string is not frayed or split. It has been cut. Who cut it, Patrick? Tell me that.
How should I know?
Now listen to me. You must pay for that one string being renewed yourself. The rain had nothing to do with its being broken. I think you know that very well. If you still want the racket restrung, you can save up the £2 you're allowed each week to pay for it yourself. But it will take you more than a term's money.
Huh, you call that fair? I'm not staying here anymore.
Patrick, sit down at once.
Don't call him back, William. He's just a new boy. He's got to learn our ways. Now, any more complaints?
Any grumbles? No? Good. The meeting is over.
Oh, Julian, isn't Patrick mean? Did he really cut that string, do you think? It did look as if it had been cut.
Of course he did. He's an idiot. We'd better look out for him now, Elizabeth. He may really try to pay you back.
Pah! I'm not afraid of Patrick.
Patrick brooded over the whole affair. He was annoyed at having been caught out over the cut string. He had a sulky nature and could not easily forget anything that upset him. He completely ignored Julian and Elizabeth, turning his back on them whenever they came near. This only amused them, however, and in the end, Julian turned the joke on Patrick by calling out a warning to him that they were approaching whenever he or Elizabeth went near him. Patrick tried in vain to think of some big, triumphant way of getting back at Julian and Elizabeth. He was bitterly disappointed that Julian was so good at his classwork. His cousin had always been so don't-care-ish over that, so he had heard, and Patrick had looked forward to crowing over him and being top each week. But no matter how hard Patrick worked, Julian seemed to be able to work even harder. Julian had brilliant brains, found learning easy, and was determined that Patrick should not beat him. Patrick was second one week, beating Elizabeth, but Julian was still triumphantly top, a full 10 marks ahead of Patrick. Miss Ranger, the class mistress, was amazed at the high marks that Julian, Patrick and Elizabeth showed each week. What she did not know was how hard they were competing with one another. Eventually, Patrick decided to concentrate on tennis and to beat Julian at that. Julian was good, but he wasn't keen on being in any of the school tennis teams. He said it meant too much hard work to keep in practice. Elizabeth thought otherwise.
You know, Julian, you really should get some practice in, because that cousin of yours is getting jolly good.
So he should be. His people have their own tennis court, and Patrick has had private coaching.
I watched him play with some older boys the other day, and he was as good as they were. He'll be in one of the top teams if you don't look out, and won't he crow over you? Do beat him, Julian.
Blow you, Elizabeth. What with working like a slave to keep ahead of you and Patrick in class, and now having to tire myself out at tennis to beat Patrick. My life's not worth living. What about you taking him on at tennis?
I do try, but he's got a much harder serve than I have. Go on, Julian. You can be much better than Patrick, and I'd jump for joy if you got into the second team, which is what he wants to do.
Oh, well, if it means I might get some peace from your nagging, I suppose I'd better try.
Julian did try, and Patrick had the disappointment of being well and truly beaten by his cousin when they played against each other 2 weeks later. Patrick hadn't realised that Julian had become so good and felt humiliated and disappointed. He left the court with a very gloomy face, thinking bitterly that Julian didn't really care about tennis and was only improving his game just to spite him. Julian came whistling off the court, having collected all the balls that Patrick had been too annoyed to pick up. Elizabeth gave him a thump on the back.
Jolly good, Julian. Did you see his face? He looked as sick as a hen left out in the rain.
Or a tennis racket.
Julian, you brute.
Sorry. Oh well, it's rather a shame really. I don't care if I'm good at tennis or not, and he does. But seeing he only wants to have the pleasure of crying over me if he beats me, I don't mind beating him.
Yes, and you don't crow. I hope you get into the second team and go and play against Hickling Green School, Julian. That's always such a good outing.
Julian began to get a bit bored with his extra efforts at lessons and tennis. He was also working very hard at making a model aeroplane, for he was very clever with his hands. But all this concentration made him feel a bit stale. So he began to plan a little light relief to amuse himself and the rest of his form. He thought hard, and a sudden grin came on his face. The chimney. He sat near the fireplace in the classroom, which meant he could easily work something out. When the classroom was empty, Julian went in cautiously. He crouched down by the chimney and looked up.
It's a bit narrow, but should be all right. Let's have a look at the mantelpiece. Ah, just as I thought. Here's the little crack where smoke gets blown back through the winter when there's a northeasterly wind. The cement is worn away. Ah, good. So with my penknife, I'll just wear it away a tiny bit more. And there we are. Now, I tie my penknife to this piece of string, push it through the hole, and hey presto! The knife has pulled the string through, so the string is threaded through the hole. Very neat, although I say it myself. Now, if I put a nail into the mantelpiece to hold this end of the string, I can undo the penknife from the other end, leaving the string safely threaded through, while I go and fetch the most important part of the trick.
Julian then disappeared into the corridor and fetched a little bell that was kept there to summon the matron if she was needed in a hurry. Back in the classroom, he carefully tied the bell to the end of the string that hung down the chimney. Then he undid the other end from the nail and pulled it so that the bell was dragged out of sight up the chimney. Then Julian gave a little tug to the string he held, and a muffled, rather weird tinkle came from up the chimney.
Oh, good. That works well. That'll give everyone a surprise. Now, if I bring this loose end of the string down to the floor and tie it just here to the leg of my chair, like this, we should have some fun when I'm sitting at my desk and move my chair a tiny bit. Now for a little practice. Brilliant! That will give the class a nice little treat this afternoon.
Miss Ranger took the class that afternoon. It was a geography lesson, rather dull. Julian waited for a moment of silence and then gave the string tied to his chair a little tug. At once it pulled the bell hanging in the chimney, and a sudden little jingle sounded in the room. Everyone looked up. Julian did too. He meant to be as surprised as everyone else. Then he moved his chair a little bit.
What's that noise? It sounds exactly like a bell somewhere. Where's it ringing? Has anyone got a bell with them this afternoon?
No, Miss Ranger.
Well, it sounds up the chimney. But how could a bell ring up a chimney?
Well, it couldn't. So we won't ask you or anyone else to go crawling up the chimney to look for bells there, John. Now this is getting beyond a joke. Stand up, everyone. And put your hands above your heads. If anyone has a bell and can ring it when his hands are above his head, he will be very clever.
There it is again. That's funny. Nobody's got a bell, and yet it rang again.
Miss Ranger, what is it, do you think? It's peculiar.
Where do you suppose it is, Miss Ranger? Can't we look for it?
No, you cannot. I'm not having excited children crawling all over the classroom and ruining the rest of the lesson. Bell or no bell, we go on with the lesson. Now sit. Now take no notice. I have only one more thing to say about this bell, and that is, if I find out that anyone in this class is plaguing us with a jingling bell, I shall do a bit of plaguing myself. And the culprit will be very, very sorry for himself. Be quiet! And get on with your work. Well, at least we'll know where that bell is ringing from. Come on. Break now. Arithmetic when you come back.
It sounded as if that bell was ringing from the chimney. I know it did. Let me get past, Julian. I'll put my hand up the chimney and see if I can feel it. It is up there. I thought so. But how on earth did it get up there? Julian, what are you laughing at? It was you. One of your ridiculous tricks. But how did you get the bell hanging up there? Easy. A bit of string through the little hole here, under the mantelpiece like this, and hey presto! Let me take it down now. There. I'll take it back to where it belongs when we go out.
What a childish trick. I'm sure Miss Ranger will be very scornful about it when I tell her.
Sneak! Telltale!
We'll never speak to you again if you do that.
All right, all right. I was only joking.
Hey, Patrick, what do you think you're doing? Kicking the bell like that. I hope for your sake it isn't broken. That's the matron's bell. Taking it out on the bell instead of on me, I suppose. Pity you can't see a joke, Patrick.
The next day, a really rather peculiar thing happened. It was Miss Ranger's class again, this time in maths. All the children were copying sums down, when once more there was a curious noise from the chimney. Everyone raised their heads and grinned. Was this another of Julian's tricks? But he looked as surprised as they did. The noise came again, a struggling kind of noise, and then a series of high-pitched chirrups, and a little soot fell down the chimney. Miss Ranger was exasperated. She suddenly thought of Julian and the tricks he had played last term.
Julian, is this one of your tricks? Answer me truthfully, please.
No, Miss Ranger, it isn't one of my tricks. I just can't imagine what is going on in the chimney.
Julian's not telling the truth. It was his chimney trick yesterday, and it is his trick again today. Look up the chimney and see his trick, Miss Ranger. He's a frightful fibber.
I am certainly not going to peer up any chimneys. Julian, are you telling me the truth?
I do assure you, Miss Ranger, I haven't the faintest idea what is going on up our chimney.
You do know. You've put something up there again, just to suck up to the class and make them think you're marvellous.
Now that's enough! Now get on with your work.
Something's fallen down the chimney. It's a baby starling. And, gosh, here comes another. There must have been a starling's nest up the chimney, and these two have wriggled out and fallen down. Oh, poor little things.
Sucks to you, Patrick. You can't say that Julian built the starling's nest or turned out the young starlings, can you?
Elizabeth, I don't like that vulgar expression. John, take those two poor little creatures and put them outside in a bush where perhaps their starling parents may see them and feed them. Patrick, take that scowl off your face.
It was Julian who put the bell up the chimney yesterday anyhow, so what are you going to do about that?
Nothing. And do not demand explanations from me. Sit down in your places, everyone. We are now going on with our lesson, and I must warn you all that I do not feel in the mood for any more disturbances, whispers, or giggles.
The children bent over their books, but there were many scornful glances thrown at Patrick. He bent over his book too, kicking himself for thinking that was a trick of Julian's and for blurting out about the bell trick. After class, Patrick hurried out in front of the others, afraid that they would take him to task.
He ran to get his racket, meaning to go and bang the balls at the side wall to work off some of his anger. But the class followed him, and soon he was surrounded by an angry little company. Elizabeth advanced on him, her eyes gleaming.
Patrick, that was a terrible way to behave in class. I may as well tell you that sooner or later complaints will be made about you at the next school meeting, and...
Shut up! Go away! All of you! I'm fed up with this school, and most of all I'm fed up with my grinning, very, very clever cousin, and with Elizabeth, the cocky, high and mighty monitor.
Stop banging the ball against the wall and listen to me. Patrick, give me your racket.
Get out of my way. I'm practicing my serving.
Ouch! You beast, that hurt!
Coward, to hit a girl? We'll call a meeting tonight. We'll say it for that for the rest of this term Patrick shall not play tennis again. We'll confiscate his racket for hitting Elizabeth.
Let me go. It was an accident. But I'm glad I hit her all the same. She deserved it. Call your meeting if you like. I shan't be there.
Nobody is allowed to miss a meeting. I'll make sure that you attend.
Oh, go away, monitor. And I'll tell you this, Julian. You're only doing this to keep me out of the second tennis team because you want to be in it yourself instead of me. I'm going.
Oh, no, you don't, Patrick. Come back.
Let him go, Julian. Elizabeth, are you hurt?
No, not really. Only bruised. Isn't he a beast, though? It is bad luck to have a cousin like that, Julian.
We'll send him to Coventry. We won't speak to him for the rest of the term. We'll see that he doesn't touch a racket again. Do you agree, John?
I certainly do, Harry. Telling that fib about Julian.
Wasn't it strange, though? Those birds falling down the chimney the very day after Julian had put the bell up there.
Jolly decent of Miss Ranger not to say anything about it when Patrick blurted out the truth.
She obviously doesn't like rotten sneaks any more than we do.
I say, what's happening? Didn't you hear the bell, you idiots? You won't get anything to eat if you don't hurry up.
Oh, goodness. We never even heard the bell, Rita. Come on, everyone. All this has made me jolly hungry.
Patrick did not come into the meal. Miss Ranger did not inquire about him. She knew that he was upset and probably did not want to appear in public just then. Nobody bothered about him. Let him miss his meal if he wanted to. Do him good. That was what most of his class thought. Elizabeth and Julian did not attempt to call a big school meeting that night after all. When they had cooled down a bit, it seemed rather silly to air the grievances of the first form in front of the whole school.
After all, Julian, the next meeting is on Saturday. If Patrick doesn't behave himself for the rest of this week, I think we should make a formal complaint about him then and deal with him.
Yes, Elizabeth, I agree with you. Let's leave it for a while and see how he behaves.
I don't really believe he meant to hit me, Julian.
Well, perhaps not, Elizabeth. He's an unpleasant bit of work, though, isn't he?
He certainly seems to be. It's hard to imagine that he's actually a relation of yours.
I wish he hadn't come here. Then nobody would have known I have a cousin like that.
They don't blame you for him, Julian. I think they sympathise with you, like me.
It's not that. It's all the work he causes me.
Oh, you poor old thing.
It's hard enough to beat you in order to be top of the form. It's getting even harder to beat Patrick, and I'm really a bit tired of practising my tennis at every moment just so that he won't be in the second team.
It's jolly good for you to work hard at things. A change from last term. I wonder where Patrick is. He hasn't shown up at all.
Good thing, too. I expect he doesn't want to face the form. They'll do to him what he's been doing to you and me. They'll turn their backs whenever he appears.
Where did you put his racket? Have you hidden it so that he can't get it?
Yes, I've put a note in his desk to say he can have it back when he apologises to you. Otherwise he won't have it.
Oh dear, I don't really like all this upset. It makes me have feelings that aren't at all suitable for a monitor.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if Patrick comes and apologises, and I believe he'd rather lose his racket than do that, I shan't feel like accepting his apology. I might say something rude and begin the upset all over again.
Well, do. I've no objection.
Come and have a game of tennis. Let's slash out at all the balls and work some of our crossness out of us. Come on.
So out they went and were soon hitting the tennis balls at will. When they had finished, they looked about for Patrick. Would he come and apologise? He must have seen the note in his desk by now. But he was still nowhere to be seen. That afternoon, the children were allowed to take their tea into the garden and have little picnics in friendly groups. That was always fun. Elizabeth, Julian, John, Harry, Rosemary and Joan found a place in the shade by some bushes.
This bread and honey is gorgeous.
If you eat any more, Elizabeth, you'll be as fat as butter.
That's enough from you, Harry. Has anyone seen Patrick recently? He didn't come in for dinner. I'm sure he must be getting hungry.
He's probably having tea by himself somewhere, brooding over his woes.
I did see him coming out of our classroom a bit earlier, but I've no idea where he went.
Frankly, I don't particularly care where he is. The way he's been behaving almost makes me ashamed to be a member of the Holland family.
Oh, come on, Julian. No one's blaming you for his behaviour.
There you are, Julian. That's exactly what I said to you. Nobody can blame you for things that Patrick does.
Well, that's very decent of you all. You're a good lot.
They thought no more about Patrick. Elizabeth went back with the others to fetch her prep and do it out of doors that lovely warm evening. But it was difficult to learn French verbs when the swallows swooped and darted in the sky and bees hummed happily in the flowers around. French verbs didn't go well with swallows and bees. When they all went up to bed, Elizabeth looked round once more for Patrick. She hated to go to bed without making up a quarrel, though she had often done so. She called to Julian as he went to the boys' dormitory.
Julian, see if Patrick is in your dormy.
Right, hang on. I won't be a tick.
Hello, Elizabeth. What are you waiting for?
Hi, John. I'm waiting for Julian. He's just gone in your dorm to see if Patrick is there.
Oh, I expect he's sulking somewhere, afraid to show his face.
There's no sign of him. He hasn't come up to bed. I must confess I'm beginning to get a bit worried about him. I'm not sure whether to report it or not.
I know what you mean, but I think we could leave it a little bit longer.
You're right, Elizabeth. The trouble is, if I do report him and he's hiding away somewhere, waiting till we're all in bed so he's not jeered at, he'll get into even more trouble.
Yes, and he'll think you reported him just for that reason, to get him into a row.
Hello, you lot. What's going on?
It's Patrick, Harry. There's no sign of him. We think perhaps he might be hiding somewhere, so I'm a bit reluctant to report him missing.
We three are all agreed on that.
I think I'll go to bed and wait till Patrick comes in before I go to sleep.
Yes, and we won't rag him at all. He's had a pretty poor day one way and another.
His own fault. But yes, I'll do the same. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, all.
But, alas for their good resolves, every boy was fast asleep before 5 minutes had gone. The girls in their dormitory fell asleep too, but Elizabeth kept waking up and wondering about Patrick. As she turned over for about the 12th time, she thought she heard a rustling of paper. She sat up and groped for what she had heard. Yes, there was a bit of paper somewhere in her bed. It must have slipped down there when she got in. She pulled it out and put on the light. It was a note from Patrick. Elizabeth read it in astonishment.
Dear Elizabeth, you can believe me or not, but I didn't mean to hit you, and I apologise for my racket slipping down on your shoulder like that. It was partly your fault for grabbing at it. I wish I hadn't blurted out about Julian's trick too, but I said it without thinking. You won't be bothered with me any more. I'm fed up with Whiteleaf, and I'm going away tonight as soon as it's dark. I'm going home. It was mean to take my racket away. I would have liked to take it with me. There's no use in staying at Whiteleaf. Julian is determined to outdo me in everything. But the tennis isn't fair, because I really could do well at that, and I might have got into the second team. Nobody likes me now. I don't like anybody either, least of all you. I hope there's a good old upset about me running away. It will serve this beastly school right. Patrick.
When Elizabeth had finished reading, she sat staring at the letter in a panic. Patrick must have slid it under the sheet for her to find when she got into bed, and it had slipped down when she got in. What a pity she hadn't read it hours before. She might have stopped Patrick from being such an idiot as to run away. She slipped on her dressing gown and went to Julian's dorm. She put her head round the door and called softly.
Julian?
Elizabeth, what are you doing in here? You'll get into a frightful row if somebody sees you.
It's about Patrick. Come down into our classroom and read a note he's left in my bed. It's urgent, Julian.
All right, hang on. I'll get my dressing gown.
Hurry!
Right, let's go.
Don't put the light on. I've brought my torch.
Let me read the note. Didn't mean to hit you. Wish I hadn't blurted out about Julian's trick. Ha! I'm going home. Oh my goodness, the idiot. No use staying at Whiteleaf. I might have got into the second team. Nobody likes me now. It will serve this beastly school right. Patrick. I say, the fathead.
I said it was serious.
We'll have the police looking for him and Whiteleaf in the papers, and there'll be a frightful disturbance. What in the world are we going to do?
When do you suppose he went? He wouldn't go till it was dark, would he? It can't have been very long, because these summer nights are light for ages. Should we snoop around a bit and see if we can see anything of him?
We could, but I'm sure he'll be gone.
Julian felt most uncomfortable at the thought of having to go and wake the headmaster and 2 headmistresses and show them the note. He began to feel that he hadn't come out of the affair very well himself. It was possible that the grown-ups might think him rather mean to have deliberately tried to outshine Patrick and not give him a chance to be good at anything. There was no sign of Patrick, so the 2 decided, most reluctantly, to go and tell someone in authority. They made their way down the back stairs of the school, meaning to go through to the hall and up the stairs to where the staff bedrooms were. And then, as they went down the back stairs, they heard a sound. They stopped. What was that? Where did it come from?
It's in that cupboard. Look, over there, where all the sport things are kept. But Patrick can't be in there.
Let's have a look. Try the handle, Julian.
It won't open. Whoever's in there is locked in. It can't be Patrick. He wouldn't go into this cupboard. It's only got spare sports things in. Who's in there?
Who's that? I'm locked in here. I'm Patrick. Let me out.
Oh, Julian!
Patrick, it's me, Julian, and Elizabeth's here too. We found your note just now. You're an idiot. We're idiots too, so we're quits.
You let me out at once.
All right, on one condition. Do you promise to give up your mad idea of running off tonight, and will you go straight up to bed?
No.
All right, we're off to bed.
Don't go. It's horrible in here, smelly and lonely and uncomfortable. Let me out. I won't run off, I promise.
How did you get in there?
Well, I badly wanted to take my racket with me, and I didn't know where it had been hidden, so I looked everywhere.
You obviously didn't look where I'd hidden it.
So it seems. The last place I thought of was this old sports cupboard, but while I was looking, someone came along, slammed the door and locked me in.
Matron, I expect. She's always slamming doors and locking them. Well, you're lucky. She's left the key in the lock. I'll let you out.
That's better.
Patrick, I found your note. I know you didn't mean to hit me. Of course I know it. I think we all got silly and excited. None of us behaved very well.
You didn't come to any meals. Aren't you hungry?
Yes, I am.
Come on, let's go to our common room, and you can have some of the tuck I've got in my locker. Don't give me away, because we're not supposed to have food at night. Elizabeth, you look the other way. Being a monitor, you can't approve.
Oh dear, can't I? But I do. Julian, where did you hide Patrick's racket? I'll go and get it.
In the music room, behind the upright piano.
Right, I won't be long.
Patrick, I don't really want to be in the second team. I just thought I would be, to show you I could be. But all this practicing bores me. In any case, you'll always be better than me in that, so go ahead.
Oh, well, thanks. And I don't particularly want to slave to be top of the form. We'll, split our brains, shall we?
Not a bad idea. Easier for us both. Ah, here's Elizabeth back again.
Here you are, Patrick. Here's your precious racket. And don't you dare hit me again with it.
I promise. I say, whatever would people think if they saw us all here munching biscuits at this time of night? Now don't you go reporting us at the next meeting, Elizabeth.
Come on, we must go to bed. We shall all be bottom of the form if we go on like this, staying up till past midnight.
They crept upstairs very quietly and said good night on the landing. Elizabeth got into bed feeling at peace. Who would have thought things would turn out like this after all? Perhaps Patrick would settle down and be as proud of Whiteleaf as they all were. Julian got into bed and was asleep at once. Patrick was in bed too, but he was feeling rather uncomfortable. He had taken his racket with him, feeling that he really couldn't let it out of his sight now, and it was a very hard and knobbly bedfellow. As he began to doze off, he muttered quietly to himself.
Whiteleaf School's not so bad. Julian's not so bad either. And as for Elizabeth, why, she's really quite nice. I'm very much afraid I'm going to like her.